Welcome, everybody. We're going to just give some time here while the participants log in as we track the number of folks. So give it about another minute or so and we'll get underway. So thanks for joining us.
Some familiar names even. Exciting.
All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm sure we're going to continue to get participants logging in throughout this session. I know that trying to fit in a bunch of sessions during a work day is difficult. We appreciate the attendees that we do have here that stuck with us here post the keynote. Harvard Business Journal just posted about a week ago a study that revealed that 77% of CEOs reported that COVID sped up their digital transformation strategies. And it was a perfect timing for our session today because that's what we're going to attempt to unpack here with our esteemed panel. My name is Mark Rieder. I'm head of innovation at NFP. NFP is an insurance brokerage, global insurance broker, operates in all different business lines. And we too are on a digital transformation path. So I'm excited to hear some of the feedback here and some of the tips from our panelists. But before we get started, I'm going to actually let them introduce themselves as opposed to me maybe reading from a paper and or butchering anything. So ladies first, Dorothy Kookaby, could you introduce yourself for the audience?
Absolutely. Good morning, everybody. I'm a senior principal HR business partner for Dovel Technologies, a strategic HR business partner that supports executive and senior leadership in areas such as org design and development, leadership development and coaching, succession planning, and employee relations. Dovel Technologies, just to give you a little bit of background, blends deep domain expertise within the federal government contracting industry with advanced technologies that best fit the needs of our customers. So we work in the health IT, life sciences, public safety, and grants management space. Some of our clients include NIH, USDA, Coast Guard, to name a few. I'm really excited to be here this morning. As Mark said, we too are in very much a digital transformation. Sometimes it feels like being propelled by rocket fuel, and I'm happy to share some of our experiences along the way. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Dorothy. We'll take it counterclockwise from what I'm seeing here. We'll go down to Brian. Brian, could you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. And again, welcome to everybody that took some time this morning to attend. So I'm Brian Price, one of the co-founders and CEO of CloudTamer.io. We are a software provider that helps organizations that are on this kind of digital transformation, cloud adoption journey, really better control, manage, and optimize their overall cloud presence. And most companies, as they're kind of going through this transformation, are looking for ways to do their IT transformation in a way that's more scalable, more self-service, and our kind of value that we try to add is really to make that part of the journey just as easy as possible and as self-service as possible. So we're excited to be a part of this and share some of the successes that we've seen with customers in the government space like CMS, DHS, and other kind of Department of Defense customers, as well as commercial customers like Verizon and Indeed.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. Looking forward to hearing some of your comments and stories about how you guys have been helping companies. Wolf, maybe you could close this out here on the introductions.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. My name is Wolf. I'm the chairman of a company called EastBanc Technologies in Washington, D.C. We're hardcore software engineers, and we essentially drive digital transformations in very large companies, and I bet that everyone who's attending here has used our software and didn't even know we exist.
Awesome. Thanks, Wolf. And thanks, everybody, again for joining us, and thanks, panelists, for carving out some time today and sharing your experience with the group here. We're going to start off with, I guess what I'd say would be a relatively basic question. Actually, before we do that, a little order housekeeping here. I'm sure folks on the line might have questions along the way, and we certainly want to allow you to get as most as you can out of this session. So we don't have the ability to toggle over and have you ask questions. So if we can use the chat functionality, you all at the bottom of your screen on the Zoom see the chat feature. There's a Q&A section as well, but just so I can stay focused on one spot, if you could use the chat to submit your questions, we'll do our best to get to them, whether they be woven in within the agenda of things we want to talk about or at the tail end of our discussion. And if we do not get into any of your particular questions, feel free to ping anybody on this panel on their LinkedIn. Everybody is active on LinkedIn. I think the profiles might have been shared with some of the marketing of this event. And either way, you now have all of our information. And I know that everybody's active out on LinkedIn. So let's get down to some business here. We're going to start off. We kind of have this feeling that many of the folks that are joining us today might be on all sorts of the spectrum of where they are within their organization, whether how far along the digital journey they are, or just their general knowledge of what digital transformation even is. I know that I struggle sometimes internally talking to some of our field. When I talk about digital transformation, they automatically glaze over and think I'm getting too techie with them because I use the term digital transformation. So maybe we can unpack that a little bit. Well, maybe Wolf, you could help us unpack, when we think of digital transformation, how would you define that so that folks are all on the same page before we charge forward here and really drill into digital transformation at their organization?
Yeah, maybe it's helpful to say what digital transformation is not. So it is not the automation of manual processes, and it's not the digitization of something that's analog. What digital transformation in my world is to turn companies into software product companies or technology companies that provide X. So if we take an insurance broker as an example, you have to start thinking like a technology company that provides insurance brokerage services, either in person or digitally, to your end customer base, which then translates into very new revenue streams, very new capabilities that you as a company will have. I can give some examples. The Washington Post is one of my favorite examples. A media company as traditional as they come. And over the years, the heart of any type of company is a system. And in their case, it's a content management system to manage content, to edit content, to provide content, feed content out. They had taken something off the shelf, wanted to replace it. Good old traditional story of lift and shift. But we did it very differently. We started strangling the system through custom small modules that provided new ways of providing their content out to new channels through APIs, through social media, you name it. And over time, their competitors started licensing their software from the Washington Post in order to power their own systems. And before they even know it, they became a software company with a software revenue stream that happens to have a newsroom full of reporters. And, I could give dozens of these types of examples. To me, that is digital transformation.
Awesome. So not necessarily always a big lift and shift of everything you're doing.
No.
Actually a leaking into just a new way of doing it that then bleeds into becoming the new norm as opposed to what they were working with before. Interesting. Brian or Dorothy, anything to add there? Just because I think this is setting the stage for our meeting. And I think in each of your roles, you probably have different mindset of exactly what transformation is to you. And I think there are different definitions out there. Anything you might want to add?
Yeah, no, I'd be happy to. I think Wolf hit the nail on the head there, right? The act of transforming your business digitally is really just reinventing how your consumers, how your employees, how all the stakeholders really use technology just to empower decisions in your organization. One of my examples I use a lot, there's a lot of public case studies that are out there that people can read, is Capital One. So Capital One, is a bank, right? At its core, they provide banking and investment services. But if you look about 5, even a little bit longer years ago, they started to make this very purposeful journey to be technology first in the way that their apps work. When they acquired ING, to be able to integrate that into just this self-service experience for their end customers. When they started to do a lot of massive migration, shutting down data centers to move into AWS that they just completed the end of last year and the beginning of this year. And even when you went to tech conferences, I was always surprised. There's Capital One there. Why is Capital One at a DevOps conference? Well, it's because that they're trying to look to attract talent that comes in and really rethinks how they deliver their services to their customers, the services that their employees use to make those decisions. And that's just a really powerful way where today they're a technology company first, and banking is what they offer as a service. And that's super powerful, I think, for any organization of any size to think about how, and the role that technology provides is not just an enabler, but really critical to the way that the organization is perceived in the market, the way the consumers interact with it, and then ultimately the way that they continue to transform and evolve their business offerings.
Awesome. You mentioned people there, Dorothy, maybe.
Yes, absolutely. So I was going to jump in with another component of it. We at Dovel have an innovation and technology group that leads all types of initiatives and advancements in terms of fostering partnership to build solutions that our clients, complex problems that are facing our customers, but using advanced data analytics, digital modernization, cloud adoption, things of that nature. But I'm coming at it from a people perspective within our own organization. I also think of digital transformation as a cultural change. When you think about leveraging that technology, a little bit depending on where you are in your maturity model in terms of digital transformation, it is a little bit of a lift and shift at times. Dovel acquired 2 organizations within the last 2 years, so we're really going through, on top of the pandemic last year, we're also going through a lot of harmonization, and it requires us to look at what we have, harmonize, challenge the status quo, adopt more technology as we are trying to go about our day-to-day business, whether it's for our internal clients or, like I said before, client solutions.
Awesome. And I agree 110% that much of transformation is dependent upon the people. And maybe we can dive into that a little bit as we progress here through our conversation. But before we do, let's talk a little bit about, for the folks that are in the audience, I think, again, we probably have folks that are all across the spectrum of where they are on their digital transformation journey. Some that maybe are pretty far along and are looking for some affirmation that they're doing things correctly, or at least like others are. I don't know if you could say that they're necessarily correctly, but they're like others. Maybe some that are just getting started, or maybe some that haven't even begun yet, and they need to know where to get started, and they love to learn from, you learn from other people's mistakes and hopefully lessen that learning curve. So Wolf, you're shaking your head. Maybe we can talk a little bit and a nice little exercise here. Maybe we can come up with, let's think if each of us could provide one thing that you think is critical, or, I'm looking for like a top 3 list of things to consider or things that are important when you're starting down this path to understand before you dive in. And again, maybe we can help some people along here.
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason why I had to smile is there's a saying inside of my company that says, and forgive me, it may not be politically correct, but stupid people don't learn from their own mistakes. Normal people learn from others' mistakes, and intelligent people learn normal people learn from their own mistakes, and smart people learn from other people's mistakes. So hopefully we'll provide the latter type of level of learning today. And you just reminded me of that saying here.
We probably have a lot of smart people on the line here, like part of the
do.
Tech
I even recognize them.
Prerequisite, I think, right?
Yeah, exactly. The key really is to start in somewhere close to the heart of what you do as a mission. So if you remember my example from the Washington Post, it's that content management system. It's producing content. So you have to be at the heart of what you do. But of course, you cannot rip out the heart immediately. So at the heart, but start as small as you possibly can so that you control your risk. This is a really risky endeavor. And my best example always are, how do startup companies approach this type of thing? They don't have capital, they don't have customers, they don't have a large army of engineers, yet still they get started. They get started with what I would call an MVP or a killer feature. Just to select that one thing that you can complete within a month or 2 or 3, your risk of getting it wrong is probably high, but is it really a risk that endangers the entire organization? No, it doesn't. It's just a little thing that you're trying. And then you invoke this initial change of going towards that journey. And then you iterate, very, very disciplined. I'm German, so I love the disciplined approach towards everything. And make these types of steps, again, as comfortable to you as you possibly can do. A startup probably iterates every single week. Maybe that's too fast for you. Maybe iterate every 2 weeks, maybe every 3 months. It's okay, as long as you iterate. And then one of my pet peeves, last point, is that the compounding is always underestimated. So keep the rate of change at every iteration steady. And what do you get? You get a hockey stick. And before you even know it, you've transformed. But you started with a tiny step without risking the entire endeavor, without risking a lot of capital. So 3 pieces of advice that I've seen work beautifully every single time.
Awesome. Thanks, Wolf. Dorothy, we'll shoot up to you. Maybe anything you can add to the list of
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Mark. What was top of mind for me was to decide where to focus your technology. So a little bit similar, but different in the sense that, every company has different requirements, different sizes, different budgets. And you want to look at the initial effort on where to focus the technology that will give you a more immediate payback. So for us internally, when we think about our employees, again, it was for Dovel, in between the harmonization, it was also not having the right data to be able to make good business decisions, to be able to predict outcomes, leverage data analytics. Our senior leaders, executive team were really thirsty for this knowledge and able to enable us to be able to make good decisions. So we focused on implementing SAP SuccessFactors and choosing that as an area that would be vital to, it's a cloud-based solution for core HR and talent management features for those that are not familiar with it. And it's vital to our organization's growth and will provide significant improvement in terms of employee experience and the people manager experience, where you're leveraging self-service technology as well. So that's where we've been focusing. And like I said, it's pick that one spot that's going to give you the most immediate payback.
Awesome. That's interesting you should mention. That's one of the things that I always point to when starting to introduce the digital transformation journey that we've taken, is we talk about market factors and I think the drivers. And one of them, I think, is technology advancements. And the second, right behind that, is data availability that is ultimately, achieved and aggregated and obtained via the technology. We're at a point in time where the availability of data is unlike it's ever been before. And if we're not putting it to use information, we're missing the boat for sure. So I can appreciate those comments. So Brian, how about any tips from you?
Yeah, so well, first off, I just wanted to say, I think Wolf's point just around starting small and iterating is so critically important, and Dorothy's as well, about you're finding that right point in your business that you want to transform. I think that's, identifying those two things are important. I'd say that the one thing I would recommend is to not overlook the training aspect of your employees in this process, right? In a lot of cases, you may have, staff that, don't have all the right skills that you need. So sometimes it makes sense to start by bringing in, an outside firm to help with that initial project to kind of get you kind of up to speed. But, your business needs to transform in this process too. Not just application by application. It's a cultural thing, as I think Dorothy mentioned earlier, that has to happen. So, you need to think about what's that life cycle for your employees to get trained and comfortable with new technologies, whether it's big data to be able to kind of make some of these decisions. If it's the tools that you're investing in, maybe it is just a commercial piece of software that's going to help you better aggregate and make decisions. There's always some customization that's going to have to happen there. There's always going to be some training that's going to happen. So, kind of don't overlook that in this process. As you start to get started, kind of think about what is your leveling up plan for your staff? What's the goal that you have in your organization to continually improve every day, and advance your team in the technologies that they're going to need to be proficient to now maintain one application after the next application after the next. I think it's just something we've seen a lot of organizations somewhat overlook, somewhat rely on the consultant only approach forever and ever and ever, which is just a very, very expensive approach that ultimately doesn't embrace the technology culturally that it needs to fully evolve.
I think it's a great point. I
love that point.
Yeah, I mean, early on in our journey, I can tell you that, we first started with identifying all the technology solutions that exist in the market. And we saw real quickly that people were somewhat intimidated, right? And they didn't know where to go. So we took a step back and said, let's talk about innovation and educate people on what it is. And the fact of it is, it's not the shiny technology, it's the drive to be better and to improve upon your business process. And you hit on that, Brian. So I would add here to the list of the topics that everybody just spoke about, simplifying it down to solving problems. So forget about the technology, and it seems kind of odd to say, we're talking about digital transformation and we're saying forget about technology. But I think if you can get your folks to focus on their problems or their challenges and where they think they could improve, you then can have the folks that are handling the technology and understand the overarching strategy of the organization around technology, be able to come and help present options as how to solve for those problems. So not only does that eliminate folks feeling the need that they need to be, a PhD in technology, but it also gets buy-in from your organization and the people that ultimately are going to interact and make change happen. Because it's not going to be just the technology team or the innovation team or this separate unit. It's got to be the folks within the organization. So, which kind of brings us to a point here around employee engagement. I know that the word engagement has come up quite a few times in these conversations thus far, and I know that if I'm thinking back, heck, it must have been over a year ago because they were actually real conferences and not virtual conferences. There were a lot of conferences that were talk about engage, and that was the new hot word other than innovation, or which is the other overused word. So let's talk about that. Like, why do we think, I just referenced a little bit, but the importance of people engagement and where that lies on the list of priorities when you're putting a transformation journey and a path in place. And Dorothy, since you're near and dear to your heart and close to what you do, why don't you kick us off?
Sure. Thank you, Mark. So let's start with the definition of employee engagement. As Mark noted, you hear that all over the place, but do you really understand what it is? So I'll start with a more formal definition, where it's a concept and an effort to understand and describe, both from a qualitative and quantitative perspective, the nature of the relationship between an organization and its employees. That sounds dry, but you get the point. A more friendly definition, is employee engagement is the extent to which employees feel passionate about their jobs and how committed they are to the organization. Those two together is what employee engagement means to me. Why is this important? It's all interconnected. It's part of a big puzzle, because when employees are engaged, they're more likely to be invested in the work that they do. And that leads to higher quality work product, both internally and for our customers. Companies that invest in employee engagement, they'll be able to increase their productivity, work quality, and then retain that top talent. So how do you get people engaged within the digital transformation process? So I think of it on a larger scale. You want to make sure that everyone is on board, not just stakeholders, but everybody. From the very beginning, ensure that your employees and stakeholders are informed, they're educated and involved in that path of transformation. Talk about the benefits of going digital to employees, communicate the challenges, because it isn't all a bed of roses, as we've heard from everyone, and answer the critical questions of what's in it for me and how will I benefit, to create excitement about digital transformation. Because yes, to our technical colleagues, you don't have to drum up excitement, it's already there. But for others that don't necessarily live and breathe this, you can start out small, with a small innovation. So I'll give you an example. So the HR and recruiting team partnered with our innovation and technology group and some summer interns. And they created an HR chatbot, which we named Heidi, and used artificial intelligence to allow employees to search for available opportunities within the company. So in addition, and we started growing with this, in addition to answering frequently asked questions like, what's my PTO accrual rates, or when is our next pay date? Heidi also enables career advancement, internal mobility. It lets people look for open positions, and it just created an excitement within outside of that technical community to say, wow, we can really use this in many different ways. So that's what I would share in terms of a larger, make sure everyone is on board, and then what you can do creatively to drum up that excitement.
That's awesome. I love that idea. I sat on a panel once before where they talked about what was keeping AI and machine learning and various types of technology like that from getting fully adopted. And I actually think it's using the terms AI, machine learning, and all the technical terms that scare people away. When you just break it down into a tool that they're able to use, and they reap the rewards and the benefit from it, and then say, oh, by the way, we're using AI. Then they start to say, okay, I thought it was this robot that was going to take over the world and come crush us. Not. It's somebody that can help me find a better, position within the organization. That's great. Wolf, you want to add to that at all?
Yeah, I think it's important to actually put it into use. You're absolutely right. If you just experiment and you don't move it into a production system, and actually have like the comment here by, I think it was Robert said, end users experience what you're working on and these types of new scary technologies, then you're not really innovating. You're just researching. But innovation happens once these types of experiments move into a production system and get actually used by end users who are typically not technical. And then you gather the feedback, just like Dorothy said. In order to get engagement, you have to measure the effects of everything that you do. Again, brings us back to data. You have to measure the feedback, the usage, is it adopted or not, so that your experiments can either grow or you just shut them down. One of the most important things sometimes is to just shut down some of those experiments and move on to the one that works. Pivot all the time.
For sure. Brian, do you have anything? It's funny, I said leading into this, I wasn't going to keep passing around, but everybody has such a different point of view. I told the panelists here I was going to go down the right side, and I've gone and going down the left side, so sorry.
No plan ever survives the real world.
That's right. That's why you test and then we execute, right? So, yeah. But no, I think all valid points. The only other angle I would look at here is again, and it goes back to the comment that Robert kind of mentioned about including the end users, thinking about that end user experience, right? Digital transformation should enhance every way, shape, or form end users are going to experience the technology that's going to empower them to do whatever it is that they're doing in the organization, to make better decisions and really help them do their jobs better, right? I'll share a story. We had one customer that they were on this path of completely revolutionizing the way that they were using and storing and being able to kind of use all the data that they use for their mission, and just a brand new platform, all built in the cloud and empowering, hundreds, thousands of developers to have access to be able to do that. And when we first started working with them, the feedback we got was, well, I don't want insert customer's name here version of the cloud. I want AWS. I want Azure. I want GCP. And we started to unpack that a little bit. And what it really meant was that organization had not really thought about what the experience is for their developers, their engineers, the end stakeholders, and how they would access these individual services. Are they going through 4, 5, 10, 20 more steps to be able to get access to that technology to do their job more effectively? And if that's the case, I don't care what benefit it is, they're going to hate it, right? So you have to kind of think about what's in it for them, right? Beyond the buzzwords, beyond the technology of AI, ML, what does that actually help them do better, more efficiently? Break it down to that person that is going to be at work, maybe at 3 a.m. on a Sunday, pushing out a patch to something. Does this help them do their job better? Does it help them get home to their kids and see their kids, spend more time with their family? What is it for them that this technology is going to do beyond just what in their day-to-day work life, but in their entire life, that this is going to help them do? And we've always just found, again, with that user experience centric view, organizations will do some powerful, incredible things in this part of the journey.
Yeah, we always point to, improving lives. If you ask about what's the why, within our organization as we're transforming, and you hear, for the audience, you hear us use the term digital transformation and innovation kind of interchangeably here. And I think that's the reality of it, is because as you're innovating, you're getting better at what you do, and you're embracing new tools, and digital is helping us to execute and improve lives. And I do think, to both what Dorothy and Brian and actually Wolf said, getting everybody on board, it sounds easy, and folks say, well, what about the people that are resistant because they feel threatened? And it all comes back to that last point that Brian made and what Dorothy stated earlier. Show them how it benefits them, not how it, and get people to realize that, let's say 5 years ago, we're not going back and criticizing the process or what you had put to, the work or the systems that you put in place 5 years ago. It's a new world. And so we have to adapt to it. So this is not a criticism on the work you've done. It's how do we make what you did better now, because we're now sitting here in 2021, on the tail ends of, or in the middle of, I guess it depends on what part of the country you live in, of a pandemic, right? And so, Dorothy, one of the things I'll ask is, it seems in the conversations we all had that everybody was kind of moving down this digital journey, prior to whatever, March of 2020, when the world seemed to shut down. But if you think about between March, it might have been around 17th, I feel like I remember coming upon St. Patrick's Day and everybody being shut down, till now. How has the pandemic and COVID really, I'll call it, accelerated or changed your path at all? Has it changed the behaviors of your people? Have they embraced it more now because it's a must-have and a necessity, as opposed to maybe what might have been deemed a nice to have? I think we would all argued that it was always a must-have, but I think a lot of people have taken the pandemic and what has happened and changed their mindset.
Yeah, so to me, it's definitely accelerated, as you had stated, for sure. There were things that we weren't necessarily focusing on, but to bring up a point around another area for us was definitely the focusing on employee growth and development, that user experience when it comes to upskilling employees, realizing that we have to embrace a culture of learning. And I think we touched on that before, to become more adaptable, proactive, and we have to teach our employees how to learn, as I call it, right? you will never stop learning. And we realized being remote that we needed to implement a much more robust learning and development, provide our employees. So we're implementing, actually going through it right now, Udemy for Business. And the type of enhanced learning experience that will come through those virtual courses and training programs that include certifications and professional development credits for our staff. Upskilling, as I mentioned, everyone seems to be talking about AWS, Azure, Salesforce. They're all top of mind. But what if you're not? What if you're not technical? There's people scrambling to learn about remote working remotely, teleworking. Even though we've gone through a whole year of this, there's still a lot more to learn. There's a lot for people leaders to learn in terms of how to engage their teams and so forth. So honestly, COVID was a reason for this need, and we prioritized it, accelerated it, and we're now implementing it. In addition to that, collaboration tools. How are we communicating with each other? Where perhaps Teams was good for us in the beginning, all of a sudden now we're finding that we need other tools, Slack included. Now you could get into an overabundance of technology, and you need a matrix to figure out what you're using for what purpose. But I think it all surrounds upskilling our employees, keeping them current, and continuing to keep pace with where the digital transformation is taking us.
It's interesting you mentioned about Teams and or Zoom or whatever. I've been interacting with the startup community for a number of years now, and the startup community has been on virtual conferences for the last 5 years. And then so I would try to bring that into my organization, and we're an insurance brokerage, and that industry is not, necessarily one of the most cutting edge industries out there. And I would try to shame people like, why aren't you turning on your camera? And little things like, well, I don't have one, or I don't look good today. And presto whammo, right? It's June, and everybody now, if you don't turn your camera on, or if it's a telephone call, I mean, you feel like it's old school. So it's interesting. That's what I've seen that transition like that. Brian, have you noticed, obviously I'm assuming there's been an uptick in the work that you've been doing for folks, but have you also seen the mindset shift in the last year more so? Or?
Completely. I mean, to give you an example, I don't think in the last year our team has actually traveled to a customer site to do any of the work that we do. And normally, we love doing that because it gets us that interaction with our customers. But now, I mean, even customers that aren't here locally or aren't, geographically in the US are much more open to, just engage and work remotely to do that. I mean, our company itself, while we are a startup, we're an order of magnitude smaller. Until the pandemic, we did not fully, I would say, embrace everything to be done remotely. We still believe there was a large intrinsic value of culture that was driven by kind of that interaction in person. The pandemic forced us to think differently. It forced us to kind of think broader, about that. I'll just give a quick plug here. If you're interested in kind of hearing some of the strategies that we use, the technologies, our COO, John Lynch, is actually speaking today at 1 about the techniques that we've done and tried and employed. And, hopefully it's helpful for someone here to kind of take back to their organization to kind of bring that cohesiveness together. But looking at our customers too, I don't care what organization you were, there was some scalability impact because of COVID that happened, whether it was upscaling or downscaling, right? And we found that COVID, really that event, I think, is going to be the thing that probably from an IT perspective, we look back on a decade, 2 decades from now and say, this was the event that really forced so many organizations to embrace how they think smarter about the technologies that's truly empowering their business, whether it's migrating to Zoom and fully to have meetings, or it's something broader where they are in a full-scale cloud-first migration to be able to scale up their e-commerce platform to now accommodate for the fact their retail stores have closed, or they've had to reanalyze their supply chain to figure out, well, where can they actually pull product from to make better decisions and get things in the hands of their customers based on the current buying trends. All of those things are really what's going to make organizations survive and thrive moving forward, because the unpredictability that happened last year, I think honestly is going to be something that we're going to see more of, and that event will help prepare for even smaller changes in the future for organizations to be able to accommodate.
You're mute, Mark.
I knew I couldn't go through this whole session without having
the good old Zoom bingo.
That was the phrase of 2020. I can't believe it. So anyway,
that should be a word bingo prize for somebody today here at the MTC Digital Transformation Summit.
Exactly. Well, do you have anything to add there? Certainly a good topic.
Yeah, everything has accelerated. There's an old saying, at least again in my company, never let a good crisis go to waste. And what an opportunity! So yes, we're looking at this, forcing our hand. At the same time, it allows us to accelerate ourselves. Our customers can accelerate because decisions are being taken much more quickly. I can be in a board meeting in Oslo, which is a real case. I can be in a board meeting in the morning. I can attend a meeting in Singapore in the afternoon. I'm traveling at light speed. Before then, before the crisis, it took me a week to complete those two meetings, and in between I was unproductive. Everything has accelerated. My own life has, is now traveling at light speed, and what a great opportunity to just get things done. So, not only do we have one crisis, the COVID crisis, we have an economic crisis, we have a political crisis, we have a social crisis, and they're all converging and are forcing decisions much more quickly than it was before. So, take advantage of it. And, hopefully we'll get to answering Janet's and Kevin's questions throughout these kinds of conversations. But if not, reach out. There's so much to unpack in just what your questions are about right there.
Yeah, no, for sure. Actually, it's funny. I was going to say we have about 15 minutes left or so in the session, and I had a couple other points that were on what I wanted to talk about. But we're going to go through one of them, and then I'm going to toggle over to some of these questions, and maybe we can get a couple more in here and make it impactful for the people that are out there listening as possible. Let's talk about post-COVID era, and we started to hit on that. I hear a lot of people kind of saying, well, what do you think now as people are starting to get vaccinated, et cetera, and we're maybe approaching the post-COVID era? I don't know if I would call it that, but folks are utilizing that phrase. I personally don't see any falling back, but I'm curious if any of the three of you feel as if there's going to be all right, well, we don't need to go down that path anymore, or we should slow things down. So do you think there is going to be, I'll call it a post-COVID era pause, or do you think that it's still going to continue to be full steam ahead? And it's perfect segue off of what Wolf just mentioned there, because it's not necessarily just COVID. It's economic, it's political, it's everything social. Brian, maybe you can unwrap that a little bit. It's a big package to unwrap. So.
Yeah, no. So first off, I think the cat's out of the bag, right? I don't care again if it's just simply you've got a workforce that's now becoming remote, and they were remote for a year. I think it's hard. I mean, we made the decision. We're a remote first organization moving forward, and again, I think that you really now should be, as Wolf said, I think very, very well, using the crisis of COVID, the crisis of all these other things going on in our world to help you transform your business continually, right? Hopefully that was the kickstart, right? This is the wake-up call. Hopefully it didn't cause major economic impact to your overall business, but the reality is that organizations are going to continue to need to evolve. I'll just say alone, 2020, if it hasn't taught us all that there is just unpredictability that we need to account for, and speed and agility has to be paramount in the way that we make decisions, leading businesses and using technology to transform those businesses. I don't know what else would need to happen to make that as clear as possible. I think the one thing, and I'll just pivot really briefly to say that, in the world that we've seen, what's really helped, I think what the organizations that have stood out versus the ones that maybe are still a little behind, again, in what we do a lot with cloud technologies, right? Cloud is probably one of the central enablers that we found that organizations should be leveraging, so that they're not doing things that other groups have already solved those problems for. If you look at a platform like AWS, they have over 200 services that you can build on top of. Azure is similar, GCP is similar, right? Why spend the time and energy to figure out how to do something like voice to text or transcribing things? There's technologies that are always out there today that are readily available. You can consume them as you need them. You don't have to pay up front in a lot of cases. And that is just such an empowering thing. Again, as a startup, we don't have infrastructure on-prem. We leverage these cloud services to really help us go as quick and as fast as possible. As those providers, evolve, we evolve. They already scale. They already have redundancy built in. Don't spend the time solving last decade's problems, right? Focus the time on how your applications in your organization need to be provided to your customers. What's that user experience look like? What are all those technologies that you could maybe begin to bring together to help build that experience to that next level that really transforms and differentiates your business?
Yeah, I mean, that goes a little bit to what Dorothy was saying earlier around, the overabundance of tools you engage. Is important to realize that it is about that end user experience and how are you going to bring them together, because those tools are only going to become more abundant, right? It's not like technology is slowing down. We're on a hockey stick. So there's going to be more and more things that you can use in every aspect of your life. How do you bring it together? Dorothy, anything to add to Brian's comments there?
So I think it was either Brian or Wolf talked about the fact that, they haven't done any on-site type work for us where we support and provide solutions for the federal government contracting industry. One of the big things for us was our employees were on site 100%. In offices or on site. Remote work was a foreign term, I would say, for the majority. So for us, we really debunked that myth that you can't possibly work remotely in the federal government contracting space. And now we have to pivot that and ensure that we can continue now that the client and our customers have seen us do that. Our CEO and leadership team has seen our employees be able to deliver on it without, missing a beat in terms of what we do in our day-to-day roles. We need to be able to retain and attract talent where those telework remote opportunities are there for those that want it. I think in certain things like remote work that will continue, but others, I don't know yet. I haven't seen enough of it where I think about us needing to really rethink the role of the office. There may be that initial excitement of we could decrease our footprint, look at how we could gain financially. But it's really more than that because, the office in the past used to be traditionally a center for creating culture and a sense of belonging. What are we going to do now? And I think if we open ourselves up to think about those things, you'll either have companies that revert back to what was comfortable and what employees miss, because they certainly do. Being a remote worker is a lonely place to be on some days. But how are you really going to continue to have that culture flourish? And then I think we also need to pivot, continue to pivot on this culture of learning. So some things, yes, some things I'm not sure about yet. We haven't really gotten too far into it yet.
Yeah, Wolf, do you have anything? I have a couple of thoughts.
Yeah, digital transformation is not an episode, and it's a process. And what we really saw over the last year, at least in my world, where it's about creating a technology company first that happens to do X, that's a process that never ends. But it got kicked off during the last 12 months. In some cases, some cases, it's been going on for years already, but it got kicked off, and it's very hard to stop it. So I see a lot of the types of things that have started not stopping, but at the same time, there's some examples, like my example of having to attend a board meeting in Oslo in person, that now will probably happen less often than it used to. So some things will revert back, but they won't revert back to the old normal. There'll be a new normal in between, and that process again has not stopped. It just got started. We're just in the beginning of this, what we call digital transformation.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. To Dorothy, to your point around the footprint, the physical footprint of an organization. I mean, I don't see how anybody in a responsible financial position can't consider and think about how they're going to reduce their footprint. I don't think that a shareholder, I don't think that an executive team would stand for that not being considered. And I do understand the impact to the people. I think you just have to continue to innovate and figure out how you can get that experience from your people when they are not physically present all the time. And that's going to be a change. But I don't see everybody just hopping back in the same buildings as they were before and saying, that was just a blip, when there's an opportunity, like outside of the fact that they have leases that they have to, ride out. But once that ends, I would think you're going to see a lot of continued change as a result of this. We're going to jump into some of these questions because I think there's some good ones here. And the first one here talks a little bit about, and I think we talked about, barriers to implementing, and I think folks that aren't really up for joining in. And I think a lot of it has to forget about the technology terms and talking about how you can improve their lives and how it's going to impact them as an individual and a team with the organization. So I think we kind of unraveled that a little bit. But this next one here, and Kevin, I'm sorry, because I do know Kevin, so he can appreciate the fact that I'm going to pass by his question and move into Janet's here. Around, do we see opportunity for growth between companies that are looking to create value together that previously were competitors? I'll kick this one off. I absolutely see this. I think digitization allows you to take advantage of, and I don't mean in a bad way, other opportunities to extend your value to your customer. We live in a platform economy, and we all talk here about user experience. And I think that if you can create a better user experience to make the lives of that end buyer better, right? By handing them off to a like company that it does, provides services similar to what you do that previously might even be considered a competitor, you're improving their lives, you're improving their experience. And both of those companies, actually all three parties in that equation, are benefiting from it. And I think if you're not operating in a digital way, it's real difficult to hand off to somebody. You don't have the data. We go back to data availability, personalization. I know the more I control the data, the more I know about you, and the better that handoff can be in the user experience. So I think absolutely this opens up new markets and new opportunities for folks. I'd be curious to everybody's thoughts. Wolf, why don't you maybe?
No, absolutely. If you remember the example that I gave about the Washington Post, right? They created software that their competitors are now licensing. Why are the competitors licensing it? Because the unit cost of development for them would have been prohibitive. They might even have, died throughout the entire process as an old traditional media company. So the Washington Post receives software revenue, and the competitors get to survive. So, the digital businesses are not a zero-sum game like it used to when I'm looking at some restaurant here and I have the choice of having one dinner once a day. Now, that's the analog business model. The digital business model means that together we can build something that we each individually would not have been able to create, and therefore we both benefit from it. So there's numerous examples, and I totally agree, Janet, that this is the observation of why digital transformation is such a strong force right now.
Brian, Dorothy, you might have some comments there. Unless there's any pressing, I want to go to the next question, and maybe you can help unpack that one, if you don't mind. Comes in from Damon here. First of all, great comment that it's a great discussion. I agree. These guys are killing it here on this. So great first comment there.
Thanks, Damon.
But we talk here about measure of success and presenting to the board. I certainly do think that although the CEOs and the boards are certainly behind digital transformation, it's not lost to the fact of needing to sell the ROI and actually create some metrics and to measure. That was mentioned before. How do you there's a ton of ways to monetize data. And I think if you can lay that out, don't just talk about the efficiencies, but show how, but the 4 or 5 things that are monetization opportunities off of the data outside of improving the lives of the individual at the workplace. I think that's where you should start your focus. And Brian, maybe you shook your head there. Maybe you have something to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think it's just like any other investment that a company's making, right? You have to figure out how you just show that level of efficiency that this effort has been able to provide, right? Whether it's the time that's been reduced to make decisions, whether it's, again, long-term hard revenue that's coming in because now you've expanded to this brand new customer base. You've been able to reach potentially, maybe the average age of your customers before was in, their, mid 40s and above, and you now are kind of trying to hit this market that is using their phones to do everything, right? Those types of hard metrics to show, okay, well, here's what our footprint maybe was in the market. Here's how we've now tried to expand it. Here's the decisions that we've been able to make. This is the time efficiency that we've been able to get. Those types of things, and capture those success stories. I can't stress that enough. Like, there's so many organizations that's like in somebody's head that is in one meeting and they don't write it down somewhere. They don't use that. Like, bring those up to your board, right? They're gonna appreciate that. They're gonna appreciate how much this is actually impacting the future direction of the way the business is going to be kind of moving towards.
Awesome. Dorothy?
Yeah, Mark. So one thing that I haven't heard mentioned is really retention of top talent. And you can certainly put your attrition as a measurement of success. And that is something that your board would want to hear. In our case, we had how we handled the pandemic, the way we made our employees feel supported. Maybe there isn't that technical component to that, but certainly through providing them the tools, the resources, the communication, the support around COVID, attrition definitely is a measurement of success, and that's something that can be quantified, and we saw a reduction in it. And that speaks volumes in terms of retaining top talent.
Awesome.
I want to add. I'm so sorry, Mark. I want to add, this would have been the metric to bring up, because digital transformation is so disruptive potentially. And, we measure our success not in profit, not in revenue growth, but only in employee turnover. It has to be less than 1% per year for us to feel successful. And I think that's the number one. It's all about people. There are some comments here about, how are we bringing these people along in this journey, and what should we care about? That's what we should care about. I love it, Dorothy.
100%. So we're right at our time here. I love Felicia's comments here, and she ended with the word smile. I'm going to put the panel on present a challenge out to them. We're going to end with a word or a phrase that you would leave our audience with around digital transformation. I'm going to start. I'm going to say, be bold as you're moving forward. How about you, Wolf? Come on. Think on your toes.
Your only safety lies in the rate of change.
There you go. How about Brian or Dorothy? Come on, what do you got?
I had embrace change, be open.
Brian.
Yeah, and I would just say lean into innovation.
Nice. And
And always smile.
smile. I was gonna say, follow Felicia's comments here to smile. So thanks everybody. Thanks panel. I think this was an awesome conversation. We could probably go on for an hour. If you want to communicate with anybody, ask some questions. I'm sure everybody here would be open to sharing. Hit us up on LinkedIn, and have a great rest of the agenda, Maryland Tech Council Summit.
Thank you.
Bye.